TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. I am your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now is a Muslim convert to Islam, or they generally call themselves reverts to Islam, and his name is Dustin. I don't know if you want to share your last name. You're welcome to.
Oh yeah, it's Cassia, Dustin Cassia.
How you doing, Dustin?
I'm doing good.
All right, and you are kind of an oddball in that you recently posted a video saying with titles, I forget what the exact title was, but it was something like David Wood is right or something about like
It
that.
was Muslim agrees with David Wood. Yeah.
So now that you agree with me on everything, how can you still be a Muslim?
Well, the specific area I agree with you in, I guess, would be your mindset on free speech as opposed to the Muslim Dawa guys who are coming out now opposing free speech, as we've seen recently, the tangents they've been going on Twitter. I most certainly do not agree with that. So God bless the U.S. Constitution.
Wow.
But in terms of theology, I'd say we disagree, but maybe you can prove me wrong today. We'll see.
Well, that is interesting to hear because I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. There will obviously be people who disagree with me, but I don't have any particular problem with let's say a Muslim politician, Muslims in Congress, and so on, because I've known Muslims who love the United States and so on, and I don't mean just people who've said it. I've had good Muslim friends that I would have trusted in politics, and so when you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and so on, and even if I'm criticizing something that they've done, it's kind of in my mind, I wish Muslims actually had some better representatives in instead of like extreme, in one extreme political direction. Why don't they have someone who just is more likable? Yeah. So anyway, it is good to hear, and just so everyone knows, we do have people like Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa and so on. And one thing we don't want to do is to think that all Muslims are like that, because they're not. And when I was getting interested in Islamic apologetics and studying the Muslim sources, the Muslims I knew were generally pretty cool people. Nabil, I would have trusted Nabil with my life in a heartbeat. And so we don't want to lump everyone together. And when we have something like what's going on recently, which is kind of just getting started, where a lot of people's views are going to be put to the test here. How far we're willing to go on a lot of things. We obviously we don't want all people to think all Christians are like D. Wood. We don't want people to think that all Muslims are like Muhammad Hijab and so on. So it's good to have some different perspectives here. And this is an interesting one because we're talking about freedom of speech. I have spent years blasting away at Muhammad, telling people why they shouldn't believe in Muhammad, and then more recently chewed up and spit out a passage from the Quran, and lots of people very upset by that. But Dustin here didn't seem upset. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your views? Then we should, since you're a convert to Islam, we should probably go into a little bit of your background, and then we can go a little bit deeper on the issue of your perspective on freedom of speech and so on.
Well, to start it off, I'd say I personally did not know this was the common consensus of this liberal viewpoint of limiting speech. It's even crazy to me that there is such a debate on something as freedom of speech. It's like you think common sense tells you that's something we should leave as is. So I personally wasn't familiar that this was a Muslim viewpoint. Now, I don't know if it's an Islamic viewpoint, and people keep telling me, well, you're not a Muslim then, since the way I'm talking. Well, maybe it's not an Islamic viewpoint, but I mean, I'm a revert. I didn't check every single piece of the Quran before I came to Islam. So that's the first thing. And then I guess people kept saying, like, for example, I was having a little fun in your comments that people are saying I'm trying to get attention. Well, in a way, I am. I'm trying to dispel this view. Like you said, we need a better representative. When I'm hearing all this nonsense coming out of the main sources who everyone looks to, that's who I look to get into Islam. I saw all the Speakers Corner videos, all the Ali Dawah videos. So when you have these same people then saying that we should limit speech, well, the problem is how consistent are you on that? Is that tantamount to not ripping a Bible? Or is that just the Quran? Because the way I see it is it's a very inconsistent view of, oh, just us, we need protection. We don't care about you guys. And it's like, well, if you're going to hold that, you must hold that for everything. I've noticed with totalitarian like political systems, they push the line one bit further and further and further until it's too far. And then next thing you know, it's okay, if you speak out against Islam at all, now that's a hate crime. Like Fareed Responds was saying, the Quran, you ripping the Quran was a hate crime. Last time I checked, hate crimes typically involve violence. He didn't burn a Quran and throw it through your front windshield or something. Mm-hmm. So I most certainly disagree with the freedom of speech view they hold.
Well, this is a interesting perspective here, because I was just talking. I forget if I was talking to Robert Spencer or Harris Sultan, but I was mentioning that there's sort of multiple levels here, and there's this level where we can all have our disagreements and discuss them, and I can give my reasons for my position and you can give your reasons for your position, and you can criticize my position, I can criticize your position, and if you really want to, you can make fun of my position, I can make fun of your position, and we're all kind of on the same level. Then there's this other level where you say, well, no, actually, if I get my way, you won't be able to say what you think, or you won't be able to criticize my view. And so once someone starts heading in that other direction, I think people should be more hostile to that kind of position, because you're basically taking away our freedom to even have discussions on these issues. And so I find those positions doesn't have to come from Islam, because there are other, exactly. Communism has been like this. There have been, and there are people in the United States who are like this as well right now, who want to shut you down and keep you from talking about certain positions that you might hold. And so once things start heading in that direction, then I get way, way, way more suspicious. And as you pointed out, it's interesting to see people like Ali Dawah. In fact, I have. Let me go ahead and pull up their couple of recent tweets here. So this is Ali Dawah, and these are both from Ali Dawah's page, but he retweeted one from Muhammad Hijab. So let's just look at these real quick. So Ali Dawah says, "The concept of freedom of speech is absolute BS. I've seen the hypocrisy from government leaders to bigots, to Tommy Robinson's freedom event, to Hindus, Christians, and the list goes on. Islam allows freedom to dialogue, not freedom to insult. Consistency is key." So this is Ali Dawah saying you should have freedom to dialogue, but not freedom to insult. So now, if Ali Dawah were to get his way, and he were to say, and I were to say, hey, Ali Dawah, I think your video about apostates being killed is stupid, then I've just insulted his position, and that should be illegal. So that's kind of interesting there. And then below that we have Muhammad Hijab, who says freedom of speech can lead to violence and division if individual actors do not have the integrity to self-censor. Go to parts of America and desecrate a flag, see what happens. Go to Harlem and be racist. Go to Pakistan and eat a Quran in public. Doing it online is no test. So I guess he's challenging people to go to different parts and put their freedom of speech to the test. I'm not sure he has a very solid grasp of freedom. Freedom of speech means you're protected from the government controlling what you say, except in certain extreme cases, and that the government will protect you from people who are stopping you from speaking. So if someone like what hijab was saying, if someone's going to beat you up for burning a flag, well, that would be a crime, and the government would punish that person for beating you up because he's not allowed to stop you from that sort of thing. And so, what are your thoughts on these tweets? And again, then we'll get into a little bit of your background, and then we'll go a little deeper
Yeah,
into
well,
these issues.
for Ali Dawa to say consistency is key, to me it's quite hypocritical as this is a clear thing. I'm not because I'm Muslim, I'm not going to just automatically side with the Muslims. It's we're clearly not being consistent on this because I don't see this same outrage and this same offense taken when someone's doing this to a Bible. I see it only for the Quran. And another thing is, you think it's quite weird to see someone who is a public speaker and a debater like Muhammad Hijab, who is engaged in multiple debates, to come out and say this. How often do we hear the line, "We love Jesus more than you. We love Jesus. We follow Jesus way more than you." This may offend Christians, and it has offended Christians. Does this mean we can now, since we are offended by this, are now justified to implement a law that governs whether or not we can say certain things? How are we ever going to engage in dialogue at all? In order to even put your finger on a problem, you must engage in dialogue. You must come to a consensus by talking these things out. How are you going to then do this for a career? This is his career. This is how he brings in revenue, partly at least. How are you going to do this? And then on the contrary, say, but you just can't talk about Islam. Well, your whole career is based on talking about Christianity. And I'm sure people could go and scour the internet and find multiple things of them insulting Christianity as they have done before. So then to say, well, you can't insult our religion, well, where exactly is the consistency you are preaching? To say the concept of freedom of speech is BS is actually laughable, it's comical. I thought when I put out that video, everyone would comment, "This is a breath of fresh air." For a while, I was getting worried. Not one comment was like that. I got DMs telling me to take down my videos. I got comments saying, "Oh, I disagree." No one agreed with me on this. I was the only person I thought I'd be a breath of fresh air. Far from it. So I just think this is an eye-opener. Of course, I don't necessarily associate this with Islam because I was bringing certain verses. For example, Muhammad. What about Muhammad shattering idols? And then they counter this, well, that was only in Mecca. Well, what about in the Old Testament? We believe in the Old Testament somewhat. What about at the bottom of Mount Sinai when Moses got super mad for the calf? Are you going to respect that? Because we know our prophets didn't. And then I just see the opposite of consistency coming from the side. I'm not going to be one to just be bombarded by mass opinion. I'm going to speak out if I think what they're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm. And I do find, I agree with you that the problem of Ali Dawa talking about consistency here, because yeah, I mean, notice what he said. By the way, let me go ahead and pull it back up real quick. The concept of freedom of speech is absolute BS. I've seen the hypocrisy from government leaders to bigots, Damirams, and blah, blah, blah. He says, Islam allows freedom to dialogue, not freedom to insult. Consistency is key. Now, he says, here's what Islam allows. All right, but we're not under Islamic law. So
Exactly.
we're under something, we have what's called freedom of speech. And if we didn't have that, then anyone who's in political power would be able to say, hey, I don't like some of these terrorist attacks, so you no longer get to preach Islam. Or anytime you mention Muhammad or try to convert someone, you're going to be thrown in jail or deported or something like that. Or, hey, a lot of Western countries still have majority Christian populations, so if you say that Christianity is false, you disagree with the Bible on something, then you'll get locked up. And it's just amazing that people in the West generally say, no, you get to criticize Christianity. No, you can
Exactly.
you can criticize all kinds of things. Yeah, it's good if we generally have good manners and so on, but you get to go around preaching your religion. You can. I mean, this is a guy who, he's dedicated his life. He's dedicated his life to defending and promoting, promulgating Islam, which, the claim of Islam is everyone else is wrong. If you're not on board with Islam, then everyone else is
Yep.
wrong. So you're saying that everyone else has this wrong, and you're right, and simultaneously saying free speech is BS. And so,
I just I see exactly. For example, let's take even just him mentioning the like bigots after the free speech thing. Why is it that when the Muslims, when we're right, but when they're right, when they think they're right, they're intolerant and bigots? What? That is not consistency in any way, shape, or form. I just to say, what about the verse? There's no compulsion in religion that we love to tell all the Christians. We didn't force Islam on anyone. Well, is this not then going against that verse? You're forcing someone to respect a book they do not find holy. That is our holy book. Why should they have to respect something they do not find holy? In fact, the contrary. They think it is from a false prophet, which is why I came out and made that video because I'm like, look at David Wood's perspective. If I was a Christian right now, I would think Muhammad is a horrible human being. You are leading people astray from worshiping the real God, the triune God. Of course, I don't believe that, but in your perspective, that's completely fine. If anything, you should be criticizing why are people not speaking out against him. Like I know Dr. James White, I really like him, but I think sometimes he criticizes the way people approach it. And I guess I can understand him as maybe Muslims won't want to have dialogue when someone approaches it in a type of way. But I think you are completely justified in coming at a false prophet in your view in this way. I certainly know I come at Paul this way, but the thing is, I expect consistency. I'm not saying all, like you said, not all Muslims and Christians are the same. There are hypocrite Muslims and there are hypocrite Christians. I'm saying this because I want the same freedom to then go, not that I would, but if if I felt like it, to be able to desecrate the Bible and not have a law imposed on me that's going to make it into a hate crime. I should be able to speak about Paul and believing he corrupted the scriptures without people saying, well, if you were under my rule, your head would be cut off and you'd be dead.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you'd think that people who are in the position of being a religious minority, and in let's say the United States, a very tiny minority, right? You're talking about 1% of the population. You'd think that people who make up about 1% of the population, I know it's a little bit higher in areas of Europe and so on, but you'd think, because generally the rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so on, their most important function, well, the two most important functions: one, protecting you from government, but two, protecting you from the majority, being able to impose its will on you. So you would exactly. assume that, like I get it when any group, not just Muslims, when any group gets in a majority, it's kind of human nature to say, well, screw the idea of rights and so on. We're now in the majority. We get to crush everyone who disagrees with us. But to be a minority population, to be a small minority of the population, and then to say we need to do away with all this talk of rights, all this BS, that's interesting. I don't think it's very wise. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if I were a Muslim, I would think it's pretty wise to promote freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so on, because those things would be my protection. Those things would be my protection against the majority who might oppose me. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about these issues here in a few minutes, and we can always take up some questions. I don't know if you can see the questions from the chat. If so, you can always respond.
I can see when they pop up on the screen. But,
okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I meant on the chat on the side. But yeah, we might pull up some questions. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about you guys. This is not a debate, so do not be expecting me to jump all over this guy. Take this as an opportunity to learn why someone who is, I'm assuming you're in the United States. Is that right, Dustin?
Yeah.
Okay, so United States. What part of the country?
I'm on the west.
West. Okay, so yeah. Dustin, West Coast. Why would a West Coast teenager want to convert to Islam? First of all, where's your sunnah beard?
Unfortunately, due to my age, I can only grow little hairs on my chin. But
I'm actually sympathetic to that, because I couldn't grow a beard. In fact, people seen me, I didn't, start having this little bit of a beard until several years ago, and it's because there was always a big gap. There was always a big hole right here, and it didn't fill in until I was like in my late 30s. But yeah, so that was just a joke. But all right, so why don't you give us a little bit info about your background, and we'll see where it goes.
Right. So I grew up Christian. In fact, everyone in my family, as far as I know of, is Christian. I grew up with my father was a devout Christian, church every Sunday, and always would make me read the Bible. Like, for example, before we would go to bed, we'd always read from Proverbs and just little things like this. I just grew up with God. I never questioned it. And then I guess it was around sometime when I turned maybe 10, but throughout my life, I wasn't just reading and then accepting it at face value. I would always ask questions. They may not have been very intelligent ones, like who created God, but I was always asking questions that would be answered by them. The first little pebble that got thrown in my path was me realizing, have I ever noticed that the church is packed on Christmas, but not every other Sunday? And I was just like, I just thought that was just my first ever time where I really thought about something like that. Then later on, I think I was around 13, 14, I had my stepdad who was very into apologetics, and basically from there I was like, why exactly are these people like doing certain things? Why is it that I see people at church who I know from high school who are nothing like Christ-like? Later I went on to realize, like, for example, like Jesus says, you must first take the log out of your eye before you can see clearly enough to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So I realized, well, if there's a perfect church, I wouldn't be allowed in it. So that's not a reason to leave Christianity, but that is a questioning thing where I'm like, what exactly can I do about it? So I first wanted to take up apologetics purely to talk to other Christians and show like, okay, the common Christian I used to run into, which it really pushed me away from the community, which is actually one of the reasons I stopped going to church. But I was like, these people I have no problem with you not being perfect. I myself am not perfect, far from it. I have a problem with people who don't try and just do live how a normal person would live without morals, and then say Jesus will forgive my sins. Well, you're only Christian in name. You're not truly abiding by what it says in the New Testament. So the idea of apologetics came in helping my fellow Christians. Later, I got sent to a school that was a charter school, which was a majority Jewish school. The name of the school was Albert Einstein, in fact. And I met many people there who I was like, okay, well, why don't they believe in the divinity of Christ? And later I extended my apologetics to, I guess, Jews, where I talked to people. But I was never really knowledgeable. Like, I knew the New Testament, and I feel like my reasoning was very circular, maybe. But then later I was like refuting atheists. I was go to the skate park with my friends. This was around maybe 15. I turned atheist Christian. I was turning a lot of people Christian at the skate park. So I was doing my apologetics work, and I really looked up to people like William Lane Craig and Frank Turek. Those are the people I knew at the time. So I was destined to be like, I was like, oh, I want to be the next William Lane Craig. I want to be a devout Christian. I want to go out and preach and bring people to the truth. And so I would question these things over time, and I would check out other religions occasionally just to test myself. So I never, ever had heard of Islam, ever. The first time I heard about it was in 8th grade, I guess. And there was a popular meme going around of basically a terrorist running and saying, Allahu Akbar, and it'd like blow up, and it was going everywhere. Everyone in school was retweeting these. It was like the popular meme at the time. And even before that, via Western media, I just thought, okay, it's all just terrorist ISIS people who cut people's heads off. I was like, yeah, I didn't even really think about it. Like, I was just like, I just wrote it off. And then it came, I guess, when I was 17. 17 is when it all started. I'm currently 19, about to turn 20. 17 it started by, I saw on my Explore feed, I don't know if you know, Instagram has the Explore search bar, and underneath it recommends random posts. So I saw this selfie, and this is when I had fell out of apologetics. From 16 to 17, I didn't really, I fell out of religion. I still wore a cross necklace. I believed myself to be a Christian, but I didn't really follow much. Like, I still tried to live as a good person, but I never read scripture or anything like that. So from 17, I saw a picture that popped up on my timeline of a girl, and I was like, I'm about to slide in them DMs. So I slid in the DMs, and since it was one of my hobbies, that's like a natural, even just in terms of a values perspective of what I look for in a girl. I was like, this is something I want, as concerned of like, let's say purity laws, for example, modesty, in a belief in a God. So you have a moral lawgiver, so you believe in a moral law. So I was like, that's one of the first things that's going to come up naturally upon talking to a girl. So I said, do you believe in God? And she said, yes. And I said, what religion are you? She said, Muslim. That was like a shatter for my viewpoint. I was like, what, this innocent face and this view that I had of Islam, these do not mix in any way. I'm like, first thought, she doesn't even understand what she believes in. I'm about to disprove her religion in front of her eyes. I was like, all right. First thing I did, I'm like, well, I'm a little rusty. I haven't read this stuff in a while. So I went to YouTube, and I think the first video I stumbled upon was Shabir Ali talking to, I'm not sure his last name, but his first name is Jay.
Jay Smith?
Yeah. So Jay Smith. And it was just a short clip of Shabir saying, if I loved my kid, I wouldn't throw him in front of the bus to die. I would myself go and protect my kid. And I thought, I never thought of it from that perspective. I always thought, oh, only a loving God would do such a thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I sent that to my stepdad, who's super into all you guys. And I was like, what about this view? Like, what do you think about this? And to me, it was something, but he responded with, oh, that's a stupid argument. And I thought, maybe it is, but to me, that wasn't an answer. So I was like, well, I'll keep searching. So then I watched the second video, was a video about someone going up to people on the pier and saying, you know, Muslims like Jesus? And they were like shocked. And I'm like, they do? I thought they hated Jesus. So I was under, again, another false impression. I'm like, how could someone who likes Jesus be these ISIS terrorists? And then soon I went into a rabbit hole of Dr. Zakir Naik, where he challenged me, because at this point I still held the Christian belief. He challenged everyone. He said, show me where it says unambiguously or unequivocally the words I am God or worship me in the New Testament. And I thought, that's easy. So I go to my New Testament and I read the 4 Gospels. It took maybe a month even, but I was reading through, but just trying to read the red letters, which I don't even believe in that viewpoint now. Just read the red letters. That's foolish. But so I went on to see he never claims divinity, at least not in that sense of I am God or worship me. And then I went down a rabbit hole of Speaker's Corner videos, specifically Muhammad Hijab, Ali Dawah, and Shabir Ali debates with people like William Lane Craig. And then eventually I was like, okay, well, the Trinity's gone. That's far out the window. But then I didn't know, well, what about Judaism? Because they still hold this monotheistic belief. So then I went back, reread the Old Testament with the Jewish translation, because I was constantly urged by Israelis I know that they try and Christologize the text, so read a Jewish translation. So I did this, and I thought, well, what's the difference? And then I thought, well, what about this verse right here in Deuteronomy? As I read through, I thought, well, this is Muhammad right here. And there's a distinction I want to make about that verse, which I never hear people saying. People say Deuteronomy 18:18. But what I never hear them mention is Deuteronomy 24:10. So Deuteronomy 18:18, I'm sure the viewers know, but the verse says, a prophet will arise like Moses, right? And this is a promise from God of a future prophet to come. People always say that, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. But then in Deuteronomy 24:10, it says, never again in Israel did there arise a prophet like Moses. That's a distinction made. So we have on one hand the promise that we will have a prophet that will arise like Moses, but on the other hand, we have a promise that never again in Israel did there arise a prophet like Moses. So I thought, well, the promise is going to happen. God isn't going to take back his word. And if it's not in Israel, I don't know what the Christians believe. I saw multiple opinions. Some say it was Jesus. I know the Jews believe it was Joshua. So I thought, well, those are all in Israel. The only thing outside of Israel is Prophet Muhammad. So I thought, well, now I need to expel my belief of the violence in Islam. And reading the Old Testament really made me realize the Christians, in my opinion, personal view, the Christians have no base to go after Islam based on violence. If you're going to go after Islam, do it by proving the Trinity, not by going after the violence, because the Old Testament is horribly violent. So I just took that as a fact, and I guess later after that, I accepted, and I was on a good track for some time. Then I fell out of it due to certain doubts. Then I went back, then I fell out of it, then I went back, and I guess I've been in it for maybe 4 to 5 months straight.
So 4 to 5 months as consistently as a Muslim.
Yes.
Now the only points I saw that were kind of pointing towards Islam at all were that Muslims like Jesus, and then the Deuteronomy 18:18 and Deuteronomy 34:10.
Yeah.
So was there any more than
Yeah.
was there anything more than that?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say my like basis for being Muslim is completely sound, but there was another thing that I did want to mention. So I thought if I had taken the view that the Old Testament states a monotheistic God, not a triune God, and the New Testament brings in this slower development of the divinity of Christ, or if he didn't claim it at all, let's say, that then makes it logically coherent for a just God to clear something up. For example, Christianity is the biggest religion. I believe it's 2.4 billion or something like that. Something that is bringing that many people away from, let's say, if it isn't a triune God, something that is bringing that many people to worship idolatry, if it is in fact false, is horrible. A just God, in my opinion, it's logically coherent that he would send a third book to clarify. How are you going to leave two things out there? That's 1 verse 1. You need to be 2 verse 1. That's like saying, the game Two Truths and a Lie? Well, that's like having all lies. Well, if we believe this is corrupt, or if I went on to prove, okay, this is maybe Paul's teachings or some implementations that weren't actually what Jesus was saying, logically, I have to accept a just God would send something to clear it up. He wouldn't just leave ambiguity. In fact, I'd even go as far as saying if there were just an Old Testament and a New Testament and no Quran, I might be Christian, because I would use that mindset of, well, I guess I kind of have to believe in it, because wouldn't a just God send a third thing to clear it up? So although it may not have been completely logical, I switched from that. But then, like I said, for this exact reason, that I didn't completely have a strong basis, that is exactly why I fell out so many times. I went searching for atheism. I went searching for all these things. And now I'd say the best way I describe myself is a Muslim, with a caveat of not a very good one, because I barely pray. I mean, I fasted, but there's just still doubts that I have to, which is why I say I'm on the search. My whole channel is about where I'm going to end up, because I am still on the search, and I believe that I'm very open-minded. So.
All right. So when you in the email you sent me, you mentioned 17 and 19. So I thought that you'd been in Islam for 2 years, but it sounds like things were kind of
not consistently.
on and
No,
off.
yeah.
Okay. Just a few, and again, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a debate. I know people are, I know people want us to go into debate mode right now, but
I don't think that'd go well for me.
yeah, and it's just kind of a jerk move, right? I mean, it's just kind of a jerk move. I mean, on the one hand, we want to focus on the discussion on freedom of speech and how this relates to, because I think it's a more important issue than people are aware of. You have Muslim civilization. You have Muslim civilization where historically you're not allowed to criticize Muhammad very much, if at all. But you push, and things are not going to go well for you. And you have the West, where hasn't always been perfect, but in general we try to promote freedom of speech, and this is viewed as fundamental to development and to advancement. You have to be free to say that even the majority is wrong. And yet now we have this entire globe where, one, you have the internet. So what I'm saying goes to the Middle East, where they have a different mindset on what I'm supposed to be allowed to do. And then you have people who have that mindset even living in the West. So someone like Ali Dawah clearly has that more traditional Islamic mindset, even though he's living in the West. And so looks like this is going to be a pretty important issue. And so I think it's good to have ongoing discussions on this. So no, we're not going to go into full debate mode, but I would have a couple of kind of questions there. And at any point, you can just say, hey, I'd like to look into that. I'd like to look into that a little more, and then that's no problem. Interesting. So as a teenager, you were checking out William Lane Craig and Frank Turek.
Yeah, that began at like maybe 13 to 14.
Well, that's those are good places to go. Yep. Many of us are convinced that William Lane Craig is the baddest who ever did it on the issues that he deals with, and I know both William Lane Craig and Frank Turek. Let's see. Let's go with this one, because this is actually part of Islam. So you point out Deuteronomy 18:18, and I think you said 24:10, but I believe it's 34:10.
34:10.
Yeah. Okay. So this particular passage. Now, these are passages that we normally go to Deuteronomy 34 to show that this doesn't talk about Muhammad, but you're right in that we normally don't go to verse 10. So, and you're right that people normally go to Deuteronomy 18:18 and then don't go later. So, for everyone, I'm sure almost everyone here has heard us discuss this before, because it's probably the most common Bible passage to go to nowadays to show that Muhammad is in the Bible. But in Deuteronomy 18, you have Deuteronomy 18:15 and Deuteronomy 18:18, and basically the passages say that God is going to send a prophet like Moses. And he says, from among your brothers. So we normally point out, okay, this is talking to Jews, and it's saying from among your brothers and so on. And if we want to go beyond that, we go to chapter 34, where it explains what it means to be a prophet like Moses. So let me go ahead and read a little bit of... Let me see how much I should read of this. So, Deuteronomy chapter 34. You read verse 10.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and... Well, let me start at verse 9. Now, Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. And the sons of Israel listened to him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, for all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh, all his servants, and all his land, and for all the mighty power and for all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. So since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses. And it sounds like you're interpreting this as no one who's from Israel could ever fulfill this. But if you look at this, so Deuteronomy is written by Moses, and yet this ending is clearly put on afterwards. But I mean, I would interpret this to mean, hey, since that time up until now, when we're putting the ending on the book of Deuteronomy, no prophet has risen like Moses, which, I mean, this would at least be 1000 BC, but probably 1400 BC or so. So the person is familiar with the events going up to the time of Joshua. So I'm just interested in if this is the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and then there's all kinds of stuff that happens much later in the history of Israel that's after that. I'm just wondering why you're interpreting this to mean that it doesn't have a Jewish fulfillment, and it has to be from someone outside of Israel.
By that, do you mean the Christians do believe Joshua fulfilled it?
No, 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 no. Now you have a couple of interpretations. One, I mean, Christians generally believe that Jesus is at least the ultimate fulfillment, because you do have, and even Shabir maintains this position. I believe that there's going to be a kind of series of prophets who are fulfilling this. No, what I mean is Deuteronomy is written, right? Deuteronomy is written. So this is, the events here are about 1400 BC, and this would have been written sometime after after the death of Moses.
Right.
So the author who appended this little conclusion here, he's familiar with the events of Joshua, and he says, but no one who really meets the criteria of someone like Moses has arisen up until I'm writing this. But that would have been shortly after 1400 BC. In other words, this is not being written in the time of Jesus, and he's saying no one in Israel has ever fulfilled this, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So basically, I don't want to misrepresent your point, but you're insinuating that it was fulfilled prior to that time because they had already come way past the time by the time they're actually writing it down. So there could have been a fulfillment prior to when they were actually writing down the end of Deuteronomy.
No. I'm saying, okay, so let's suppose Moses dies, and let's suppose this ending is added on 20 or 30 years later, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Even if he says, hey, this prophecy has not been fulfilled as of this time, that's very different from saying, therefore, no one for the next 14 centuries of Israel is a fulfillment of that prophecy. So this is a side issue from whether Jesus is the fulfillment of this prophecy. It's just that this isn't saying that no one's going to fulfill this prophecy in Israel. He's just saying, hey, here I am. I'm here in 1400 BC, and since that time, no one has fulfilled that prophecy. So that kind of leaves it open whether someone for the next 1500 years is the fulfillment of it. And
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so the question is, why would this mean that someone from outside of Israel would be the fulfillment of this prophecy?
Well, I guess you are right in that, and that is a good way of looking at it, that they were writing never again up to that time. I know what you mean now. You could be right. I'll have to look into that.
Okay, no problem. And also there, the other issue, and I'm just pointing this out. You obviously don't have to answer unless you want to. But we also focus a lot on the rest of verse 10 and then verse 11. So since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, for all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh. And so one of the things we draw attention to is that when it's talking about being like Moses, because if you're obviously familiar with Zakir Naik, and Zakir Naik will say, but Moses was both a prophet and a military general. Muhammad was both a prophet and a military general, and so he'll go on these parallels. Whereas in context, it seems like when they're talking about, hey, this guy's like Moses, they're thinking primarily of having some special intimacy with God that you could call face-to-face knowledge, and also miraculous works, performing miracles from God. Right. And so the question would then become, how did Muhammad feel? Because Jesus obviously had that kind of face-to-face intimacy with the Father, and even according to the Bible or according to the Quran, was known for miraculous works. Whereas when we get to Muhammad performs all kinds of miracles in the Hadith. In the Quran, not so much, and it's kind of difficult to make any case for miracles from the Quran. So anyway, you can respond if you want, but other than that if you want to claim that Muhammad is a fulfillment of the prophecy in Deuteronomy, those are some things to think of. Those are some things to think about.
Well, another reason this I don't currently hold, but one of the things that I originally accepted it on was, I guess, Isaiah 42. Currently, I don't hold the belief that is who I think the suffering servant is, Israel. And then but I don't know how to contend the that viewpoint with later the verses about like Selah, and they'll sing a new song from the mountaintops and things of that nature, because that, or Kedar, that would seem like it is talking about an Arab nation, or at least in that area as it was naming. But I don't see how that, I mean, we certainly know Jesus didn't go there, and it's not, the Jews aren't going in there and evangelizing. So I used to hold that viewpoint. That was another reason that I joined, but I currently don't hold it. I think the suffering servant of Isaiah 42 is Israel.
Yeah, that's no, yeah. I mean, if you're not claiming it, there, as far as the Selah and stuff like that, the Muslim claim is that this actually refers to, they'll say this refers to this mountain in Medina or something like that. But
Yeah.
that's actually a city. It's actually a city a little south of Israel. It's a city of the Edomites, and so now it's always open to Muslims to say, even though, yes, there's this city called Selah right there. It's, it's still a prophecy. There's still this greater fulfillment in that it's actually referring to Medina or something like that. But Sam Shamoon has done some awesome stuff on this, where if you don't just look at Isaiah 42 and you actually go through the rest of the book of Isaiah and you start making the connections to these things that are spoken about there, at the two main interpretations: one, this is referring to Jesus, and two, as you pointed out, that this is referring to Israel. But yeah, once you start looking at the theology of Isaiah and how these things tie together,
Right.
not a very strong case for
Well, that's exactly
Muhammad.
that's exactly how I changed my view. Because before I was just reading it from 42 to 43, and then I'm like, okay, but then when I went back to the Old Testament, I started saying, okay, that to me doesn't seem like that in the slightest. I mean, to me, it seems perfectly clear as being Israel, as throughout the Isaiah, if you read Isaiah from chapter 1 to the end, you see it is constantly referred to as the servant. So as returning to that, still as a Muslim, I returned to that and was like, okay, maybe I need to drop that viewpoint.
Well, that's good, because you did say that you don't just go along with what Muslim apologists
That's opinion, exactly.
say. Yeah. So no, that's good. Now, the other thing I'd be interested, and I'm going to confess, I could maul you on the violence of Islam stuff right now. I'm not going to. Yeah. But yeah, that would be kind of a jerk move. I am interested in the point you made that Christians aren't really in a position to criticize violence in Islam because of the violence of the Old Testament. Is that an accurate?
Yeah. I'd say that, well, upon reading the Old Testament, I definitely noticed, like, for example, just take the verse in, I'm not sure, it's in the Torah, I don't know exactly which book, but it speaks about if you're in a scuffle or a fight and your wife tries to help you by grabbing the man by his balls and yanking him, you then have to cut off her hand. And then and that's just one of the verses. I can name a bunch. I mean, I don't have the references in my head, but most of them are highlighted in one of my Bibles, somewhere over there. But I went back and saw all the violence, and I thought, well, to me, it's the same justification that is used for Islam being violent, is that in context, it's not violent. In context, it's of war. In fact, I know, like you said, you could maul me, and I'm sure you could on this point, but for me, I personally went through it, and I didn't I believed in context it was justified. That opinion isn't something that is subject to change, obviously. But I think for me, the better approach was certain verses that were more of, I'll give you an example. I felt satisfied on the violence, but that was only on the violence. I didn't check out every single thing. And then I came across your videos of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, certain verses that are disturbing, to say the least. And I was like, okay, that is something. I mean, I'm not sure how I contend a morality claim against that, because exactly where am I getting it from? I need an external source if I'm going to say these things. And I felt, even though there were some crazy things, these same things are in the Bible. I'll give you an example. The marriage of Aisha, it's like, I don't know how to explain that. Like, I don't even know how to explain that. I don't know if that disproves the religion, because at the end of the day, what are we using? Our subjective point of view? And maybe the Christians are using that, but like I said, I feel like, for example, in the Old Testament, I don't know exactly the translation, but I have the video that talks about it, where it talks about taking children as concubines, essentially, as sex slaves. And it's in, what's his name, presented this in a recent video, and you could find it in Fareed Responds' recent video. It's, I think, a guy you actually debated. I've yet to see the debate, but his name is Zakir Hussein, maybe? Is that his name?
Yeah, there's a Muslim apologist named Zakir Hussein.
Yeah. So he's the one who presented that verse, and I was like, okay. And then people are saying Mary is a certain age. I don't know. Like I said, I'm still in a phase of trying to learn these things myself. And I'm not the Muslim who's saying there's no chance I could be wrong. Oh, no, Islam is true. Well, no, I'm not claiming that. I'm claiming this is what's most wild to me, with the Bible, to me, to the knowledge I have. I don't like the viewpoint or this narrative people push that I'm somehow, I was revealed that Christianity was true and I chose to deny it. That's not the case. If there is something that is going to prove the divinity of Christ, I either didn't understand it or I have not yet seen it. I didn't believe it. What kind of person in the right mind would see something, believe it, and then deny it? This has, if anything, I have every reason to be Christian. I know people who have died in the Muslim belief. If you die, shirk is an unforgivable sin in the Quran. If you have died under shirk, you are going to be in hellfire for eternity. So this narrative of I'm like a closed-minded Muslim who's no chance I leave and I hadn't checked out anything. No, this was a long journey. And maybe my reasoning wasn't good, but I mean, I'm willing to fix that, but yeah.
Well, all right. A couple things here. You might want to. I'm not familiar with what Zakir Hussein said, but you might want to go ahead and take a look at the passage he's referring to. I'm assuming he's referring to the passage in Numbers, but there's
Yeah, I believe
nothing.
that's it, yeah.
There's nothing in there saying have sex with these young girls. It's they were not under a death sentence because they weren't the ones who did some very, very bad things. You have to get the context of how they were actually part of a plot with a false prophet to get the children of Israel to be led away from God through sexual, basically drawing them away through sex. Come join us and so on. And the passage, any the girls who were too young to have taken part in that, they're not under any sort of punishment. And so if you just read that, you're saying, oh, keep these young girls. It must be to go have sex with them, and it's just not what the passage is saying.
Yeah.
Is saying at all. On the issue of violence, let me go ahead and give you kind of my perspective on why I don't think Christianity and Islam are in the same realm here. So, as far as passages in the Torah that are violent, both Christianity and Islam affirm the Torah. So any passages there would be affirmed as the Word of God by both Islam and Christianity. Now, I do want to be clear here. When I draw attention to jihad and Islam and terrorism and so on, just for everyone who's watching, in case my position is not clear, my position is not Islam is violent, therefore it's false. My position is kind of twofold. One, Islam does call for violence, therefore stop saying that it has nothing to do with violence. So that's one, right? All the people, no, it's a religion of peace. It doesn't have anything to do with ISIS. It doesn't have anything to do with Al-Qaeda. It doesn't have anything to do with any of these things. I would say that it does. So the claim is not Islam is violent, therefore it's false. It's twofold. One, Islam it has passages which, if you read them at face value, certainly sound like they're calling for the same things that certain groups are doing. So that's one, and want people to keep that in mind when if you're going through my videos and you're saying and I'm breaking down, hey, here are the 3 stages of jihad and things like that. That's for people to get an accurate understanding of what Islam teaches. So Islam calls for these things. Now, what does that have to do with whether it's true or not? Well, the second thing that I mentioned is because Islam calls for these things, because if that understanding of the Muslim sources is correct, Islam calls for the subjugation of the entire world to Islam. Therefore, you should probably look into it very carefully. If right. So, in other words, if you're converting to Islam and you see that it calls for the violent subjugation, before you start actually doing this, it would be a good idea to take a look at it very carefully. So those are kind of my points when I'm talking about violence in Islam. But so, in other words, my position is, if Islam were true, then, well, then God wants
That's just how God is.
God wants us to violently subjugate the entire world. And I believe God has the right to order that. So
I agree.
Yeah, so my position is not Islam is false because of this. But even though I'm granting that, I would still see pretty serious differences between Christianity and Islam. Because if you think about it like this. Let's suppose you take the Quran and you read it, and you read the historical background, and you walk away and say, okay, what are my marching orders now? Versus reading the Bible and asking yourself, okay, now I've read the Bible, what are my marching orders right now? So if you read the Bible, you start off, you're reading Genesis, you're reading passages. Hey, some girl crushes a dude's testicles, got to chop her hand off. We obviously don't believe in that today, but there was a reason, right? The emphasis in ancient Israel was on passing on offspring, passing on your inheritance. And so if a dude's doing something and you clock him in the head, but don't crush his testicles, because then you're stopping his future offspring and so on. Again, we don't think like that, not defending it all, but as Christians, we believe that is the word of God. But you look at these things and you say, well, that sounds weird. We don't do those things anymore. According to Christianity, you're not supposed to do those things anymore, right? That's a covenant for a particular people on a particular piece of land at a given time in history. So basically the Bible is a series of covenants, right? There's a covenant between God and Adam. Then there's a covenant between God and Noah. I'm not under that covenant. There's a covenant between God and Abraham. There's a covenant between God and the children of Israel. You start going through Leviticus and Numbers and so on, and this is what was revealed for the children of Israel. This is what was revealed for the children of Israel. This is what was revealed for the children of Israel. Then, even in the Old Testament, we're told that another covenant is coming. Another agreement between God and people is coming. And so now we have a covenant between God and people based on the work of Jesus Christ. So I'm, as a Christian, I'm part of that covenant. I'm under that agreement. Well, under that agreement, there is no violence. Governments are allowed to, carry out laws and so on. The harshest penalty that a Christian could carry out as a Christian, as part of the church, was excommunication. That was the harshest punishment. That's the harshest New Testament punishment. You're excommunicated. You're not part of the church anymore. That's the harshest thing you can do. Again, governments are allowed to, to enforce laws and things like that. So, putting this down, if you read the Muslim sources, the Quran, the Hadith, the Sirah, and so on, and you put it together, here's the pattern you get. Muhammad starts off in Mecca. He's the persecuted prophet in Mecca. He's preaching a message of religious tolerance. Don't fight about this stuff. God's going to judge. Let's not kill each other over this stuff. That's what he did when he was in a minority. Later, he formed some alliances. They moved out of Mecca. They moved to Medina and so on. They have more followers and so on. And then the message changes to one of defensive fighting or defensive jihad. You can fight, but someone else has to start it. Someone else starts it with you, then you can fight them. Someone's persecuting you, then you can respond. Still later, once they're the most powerful force in Arabia, then it becomes one of offensive jihad. That's when you get fight those who do not believe in Allah. That's when you get Muhammad saying in Sahih Muslim and Sahih al-Bukhari, I've been commanded to fight people until they say there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. So the pattern is starting off religious tolerance, but getting progressively more violent until you get to the final marching orders. And the final marching orders are, when you're able, subjugate the entire world. If not, then if you're not in that position, then there are different rules that are in effect. If you're in a minority, act like Muhammad did when he was in a minority. If you are able to dominate an area, then you dominate the area. So the final marching orders are subjugate when you can subjugate. If you look at the pattern of the Bible, it's, hey, here's a situation, and here you have, historically, you have violence, but it's when the covenant is tied to a particular piece of land, and therefore the violence is related to, one, seizing the land, and two, holding on to that land. The Christian covenant has nothing to do with being tied to a particular piece of land, and there's no violence that is part of Christianity. And so the final marching orders for a Christian are things like love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you, do good, honor people. These are commands that are directed towards Christians. Let everything that you do be done in love. These are commands towards Christians. And so, as going back to what you were saying, if the claim against Islam, and I would, this is where I would agree with you. If a Christian is claiming against Islam, look at the violence in the Quran. Look at the violence in the Quran. This is horrible. This can't be from God. Well, I think, yes, you could say, well, if that's your argument, then you got a problem here, because you've got all kinds of violence in the Bible. But if you look at the sort of trajectories that, hey, here's this entire revelation of the Bible, and the takeaway message is, yes, there's been lots of violence in the past, but right now you are supposed to love people, love your neighbor, love your enemies, love God. That's what you're supposed to do now. In other words, that's what I am commanded to do right now. Whereas if you read the Muslim sources, the final marching orders would be, and you may have a different interpretation of this, but I'm telling you, this is how I interpret the Muslim sources. I interpret the Muslim sources as the final marching orders are not go on a killing spree, or not, go wage as much terrorism as possible. It's depending on your circumstances. When you are able to impose Islam, then you do it. If you're not in that position, then don't do it. So anyway, you can comment on anything I just said. I just wanted you to have my perspective. But,
Right.
but my point is, I would not think that Christianity and Islam are in the same ballpark as far as that is concerned. Because now we're talking about, here's what Christians are commanded to do in this world that we're in right now, and here's what Muslims are commanded to do in this world that we're in right now. And they're commanded to do very, 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 very different things.
Right. Yeah. Well, as far as the verses go, I guess it is up for interpretation. I mean, of course, the Muslims are not going to be saying, yeah, we agree that we should go and kill everyone. The Muslim, like, for example, the one you mentioned of fight the unbelievers, that verse, from what I've heard from the scholars, is the consensus that it was in a context of war, and that there was also a command given. I'm not sure. Yeah, that there was a command given that said, unless they basically, if they surrender, you could fight no more. Now, I'm not sure exactly how accurate it is, but it's all subjective or not. I wouldn't say it's subjective, because there's definitely it's either right or wrong. But like, I agree with you, and the people. I mean, I see a lot of people using these violent verses to disprove it, but I agree with you in saying that is not to disprove a religion, because if God's violent, we just have to deal with that. Or it's like, that's violent in our view, but maybe in his, that's completely fine. I think the best thing, like, I would touch on, because let's say you prove violence. It's like, what does it really do for me? I think the best thing for me was the Trinity, because the Trinity does two things. One of the main problems I have was actually saying, okay, is it Islam or is it Judaism that's true? Believing in a monotheistic God, not a triune God, I thought, okay, it has to be one of these Abrahamic faiths, not Christianity, when I ruled it out at the time. And I thought, okay, well, the best thing to do is to go after a certain statement that could make it easy for me. Because if we go after certain things like, okay, was Muhammad a prophet? And let's say we prove it to be false, and then I accept it, and it's like, okay, well, where does that lead me? That doesn't lead me to Christianity, as there's many religions that don't believe in Muhammad as a prophet. So I think the best thing is the Trinity, because what the Trinity does is, let's say you prove the divinity of the Christ. And I was like, okay, there is a triune God, and it is there in the Old Testament. It is there in the New Testament. It's consistent with the Old Testament. What that does is, not only does that prove Islam wrong, as it does say in the Quran that Jesus will be brought in before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be asked, did you say these things? Did you say that you were God? And he will say, I did not. And if I did, you would indeed have known. So that they say, see, this is what I liked about Islam too at the beginning. They make a statement of okay, you just have to prove one thing wrong about the book and it is false. Whereas Christians would sometimes be like, oh, well, they'd be very nonchalant about certain things. Like, well, it doesn't have to be completely accurate. Certain things, like we believe it's God's words, but certain like things that got taken out, they're like, so it's taken out now. Like it may have been tampered with. For example, the verse of the three who are in heaven, the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, the verse in John that was later taken out, or at least that wasn't found in the early manuscripts. These type of verses, Christians are okay with knowing that they were once in there, regardless of if they're true or not. I know a Christian would probably believe in this, but some New Testament scholars think this was a later addition. But certain things, it's like the Trinity is what proves everything, because it disproves the Quran, because it says in there, the Jesus verse I just talked about. 2, it then proves Judaism wrong, because Jews don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Mashiach, nor do they believe the Messiah is supposed to be divine, nor do they believe God is a man. So I always would try and go after the Trinity specifically for me, because I would never like really look at certain things. Like there are verses, like I said, troubled me. Like I just want to mention one. I actually till this day have I have a problem with this and how Muslims go about this certain verse, which I saw in your video. That's how I first found out about it, which is, or not a verse, it's in a hadith of Muhammad sucking the tongue of whoever it was, his nephew. And it's like, and same, I guess, even with the Aisha thing, I see inconsistency. Grandson. Yeah, grandson. Yeah. So here's when I first had a problem with it. I heard in a video, and I've been scouring the internet trying to find this because I lost it and then I found it again. So I'm trying to go through my accounts, seeing which one I saved it on. But it was talking about intimacy in a halal way after marriage. In this video, the scholar said, it's one of those merciful servant videos with the music in the background, and he's like, in this video, he said, we know in sex it would be good to suck on the tongue as Muhammad did to Aisha. This was not a Christian source. This was not a Jewish source. This was Muslims promoting this. And then on the backhand of that, well, that's not sexual in any way. He was his grandson. Well, that doesn't make it not sexual. That just adds on incest. Like you're doing yourself a disservice by trying to clarify that, well, it's okay to make out with your grandson. And I'm sorry to word it that way. Maybe I am mistaken and I just don't understand it, but I didn't see how you can contend these things of someone preaching a good way that we are advised to do is suck the tongue. Oh, but it's not sexual when he does it to his grandson. But then again, I took it, well, technically it does not matter. That does not make the religion false. So then I basically abandoned it. And then I wanted to get into the Aisha thing real quick too. I don't like the inconsistency of, well, she was mature for her age. Okay, let's just break that down. Our 9-year-olds now are not the 9-year-olds back then, hypothetically. Let's take the Islamic viewpoint. Well, hypothetically, do you know how old he was when it was 60?
He was in his 50s.
Okay, 50s. Mm-hmm. So by that same logic, let's say she was 9, and by today's standards, she would be looked at as 19. Well, let's take that same thing. That would make Muhammad then also older, because the age isn't what we see today. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, why is no one saying this? And I've not seen this anywhere. And I'm like, that would make it still just as bad. A 6-year-old with a 19-year-old. I guess it's legal in today's society, but I still didn't see how.
We got we lost the connection here.
Hello?
Yep, gotcha.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
We lost you. You were saying, you were talking about
All right.
Aisha.
Yeah, so I thought about that same logic. You are now, again, doing another disservice in these types of things by now saying, okay, well, now Muhammad was 60, but I guess that's more justifiable as opposed to a 9-year-old. But then I thought, well, they're all proposing that Mary was 12 and Joseph was this. I know Christians don't believe like Jesus was conceived by them, but still, it was still a relation with them. So I thought, well, either way, I guess, what am I going to do? Like, leave it for atheism? If I'm atheist, then I have no moral claim against what he did. And if I'm Christian, well, aren't I then picking up some hypocrisy in the fact that Mary was young? And then, again, I would go back to that verse, which you said I'm basically didn't completely understand. I'll have to go back and assess it, but the verse that guy Zakir Hussein brought up, that was one of the things where I thought, oh, I guess Christianity is no better, is because it's saying children concubines, and the Muslim interpretation of it was like you said it's because they didn't have sex that they were being brought, whereas the Muslim interpretation is they were being brought because they only were willing to have sex with virgins, and due to the fact that children are virgins by nature, most likely, that they are now bringing these virgins to use as sex slaves and concubines. So again, I'll have to check that one out specifically. This is like new to me, so.
Oh, even I mean, no. Well, in Israel, if you were to take a female captive, then you would have to marry her. And if things didn't work out, she was supposed to go away as a free woman. So it's very different from taking a captive in Islam, being allowed to have sex with her, and then just selling her at the local market. But yeah, check that out, and just read something on the Christian perspective. So they are being taken as captives there. The point is they're not. Whoops, look like we're losing him here. Yo. Yeah, you zoned out for a
I
second.
don't know why my internet's bugging out. Yeah.
It happens. It's happened a million times doing live streams, so it's totally normal. Can always be sometime when a bunch of people jump on Netflix or something at the same time. Anyway,
Yeah, that could be it.
yeah. Anyway, what I was pointing out is even in Israel when they're taking captives, they have to marry those captives, and the point here is, yeah, this wasn't because, oh, they're young girls that you get to have sex with. It's these girls were the ones that didn't participate in this crime, and therefore they will not be held accountable for that.
Right.
Now, you could interpret because it doesn't say. You could interpret that as, and then
Right.
they grabbed these young girls and they all took them back to their tent. It's not what it says. You have to read that into the text. But yeah, go ahead and read the passage and get a Christian perspective and get a Muslim perspective, and then see,
Right.
see what you think. As far as let me ask you what you think about this, because the issue with Joseph and Mary, one, we have no reliable source on the age of Mary or Joseph. So all that you can have on this is speculation. You can say, well, it was common for young teenage girls to be married at that time, and therefore, if she's being married, then it wouldn't have been all too uncommon to marry her as a teenager. So you can say that sort of thing. But apart from that, it's just speculation. We have no solid evidence on her age or Joseph's age. But there is even here, I think, a difference between Muhammad and Aisha and Joseph and Mary. Muhammad is put forward as the pattern of conduct in the Quran. So Surah 33, verse 21 says that Muhammad is an excellent pattern of conduct. So Allah is saying, hey, here's a good guy to imitate. And so, I'm very sympathetic to looking back to generations, especially 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't judge them according to the same standard we have today.
Right.
But if someone is put forward as, here's a pattern of conduct for people to imitate, there you have to say, okay, well, we need to vet this guy here pretty closely. So Muhammad in Islam is very central, and he's put forward as the pattern of conduct to imitate. Joseph is not. I mean, as far as the Bible, as far as Christianity is concerned, Joseph could have turned out to be an axe murderer. It doesn't affect Christianity. Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one we're supposed to imitate, and so I think we're kind of on the same page on a lot of these things. It's just mine is, it's yes, I understand. Hey, if we're looking 2,000 years ago, if we're looking 1,400 years ago in the time of Muhammad, even let me go ahead and put this out there. When on the issue of something like sucking the tongues of boys and so on, I actually don't think that this was some sexual practice. I just think it's something creepy, right? So
Right.
like, and when I'm making fun of it, it's just someone annoyed me earlier in the day, and
It's just banter.
yeah, I'm making fun of him over that. So yeah, and now on the you came to the doctrine of the Trinity. Don't want to go into this too much here, but if you've got time, I'd be interested in your feedback, and you could go ahead and comment, or you could come back and discuss it. But Sam Shamoon and Anthony Rogers. If you don't like Sam because he's too mean, Anthony is much nicer. Although Anthony's still kind of a jerk sometimes. But Anthony has a series. It's on my channel. You can find the playlist, but it's called The Trinity in the Old Testament, and I can just kind of give you the gist here. Even Jewish scholars who study ancient Jewish viewpoints. So I'm not talking about Christian scholars. I'm not talking about Messianic Jews. So Jews who, because you said Jews don't believe in Jesus. No, there are tons of Jews who believe in Jesus. They're just they're called Messianic. So Dr. Michael Brown is a Jewish believer that Jesus is the Messiah. And as far as the early church, the bulk of the early church were Jewish believers in Jesus, who believed that he's Lord, who died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead. But it's been pointed out, even by Jewish scholars, that prior to about 200 AD, it was very common in Judaism to believe that there was some sort of plurality of persons within the one God. And their reasons for that were based on the Old Testament. And so this was it wasn't until about 200 AD, Jewish rabbis and so on began deliberately setting themselves apart from Christians, right? They wanted to deliberately say, we are opposed to the Christian theology here. And they did that by going into a more one person. So a unipersonal deity. Up till that point, very common. So at the time of Jesus, at the time of his Jewish disciples and so on, very common. And you even have, and again, Anthony has a series of short videos. I think there are 6 there. I actually have more that I've recorded of him that I've just never posted because I haven't edited them yet. But you can look it up on my channel. It's just a playlist, The Trinity in the Old Testament. And he just goes through different passages in the Old Testament. I think the first 4 or 5 videos are all just on Genesis. And these are things where the Jews are showing in their commentaries that they're interpreting these passages as indicating, in effect, that you have God, you have the Word of God, who is also God, and you have the Spirit of God, who is also God. And so the idea is, once you understand the sort of pre-Christian Jewish understanding of these texts, you've got Jews claiming that there's God, there's the Word of God who's God, there's the Spirit of God who's God, and there's only one God. And so by the time the Apostle John writes, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, we look at that and go, gosh, this is confusing. But Jews of that time would have said, yeah, he's right on the money there. He's right on the money. What they might have, if they weren't Christians, what they would have objected to is the idea that the Word became incarnate as Jesus, that the Word took on flesh and became Jesus. That's where they go, whoa, no, we agree with you on the Word part, and the Word being God and yet being distinct. So they would have agreed on that part, but they would have objected to Jesus being identified as the Word become flesh. But again, you can check those out. I'm not gonna have a discussion on it right now because you're not familiar with those. But I'd encourage you to check those out, because I'm saying this because you put it forward as this is kind of an important issue to you. The theology here, the theology of the relationship between the theology of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. And you're looking at it as, the Jews had their theology, the Christians had a different theology, and then so we need a kind of, hey, is God going to send a revelation to clarify this? And that's where Islam comes in. Whereas, and again, you could take a closer look at this just by watching these videos. More along the lines of God was revealing that he's multi-personal in the Old Testament. He gave the fuller revelation in the New Testament. Those who rejected him then tried to set themselves apart from that by entrenching themselves into a unipersonal theology. So that seems like it should be an important area of study for you if you're looking at this at the theology as being a basis for deciding what to believe here.
Yeah, well, I feel it's kind of similar in, for example, even in Islamic theology, we believe, like in the Quran, it talks about the knowledge of God and, for example, God's word, but we don't make them necessarily distinct, and at least to the point of they're not separate attributes worthy of worship. But as far as the Jewish thing goes, I do want to make something clear real quick. I personally do not think Dr. Michael Brown is a Jew. I've talked to many Israeli Orthodox Jews who do not consider that man a Jew. I would almost say he's a closet Christian who's trying to lead Jews astray. I think if you believe in the divinity of Christ, say it as it is. You are a Christian. But I didn't mean no Jews are Christians, because obviously we know Jesus was a Jew, so were the disciples. But as for Sam, I'll definitely check out the Anthony guy. I've never heard of him, so I'll definitely go and watch the series. But Sam, I have no problem with Sam. I just think his way of discussing, like, for example, people don't like you. They think you're harsh. I'm like,
Yeah.
you can be harsh. There's no problem with being harsh. I don't like when people are talking over people. Like, let people get a chance to speak. And I've only seen a few videos of him, so maybe it was a presupposition that I then based on only a few videos. But all the videos I watched of him debating, he's yelling and talking over people, and he's trying to make a fool of people. It's like, no problem, you can do that, but go and try that with a scholar. And if you want to make a fool of a scholar, that makes sense. But you got these people calling in, like you said. I mean, I personally don't care. Like, if you went on here and basically destroyed me, I just think that's entertainment. That's funny. I wouldn't personally mind it, but it is common courtesy to not do that. I mean, I personally couldn't care less, but I think it's weird that people would go on, and these people who barely know anything, and he's like just going off on a tangent to them. Like, I don't know. I think it doesn't turn me off necessarily. I just don't like seeing him in a debate that isn't a formal set up debate with if it's a formal debate, he can't just butt in 24/7. The reason I don't watch him is because everything I watched wasn't a formal debate, and he would just constantly talk over people. I'm like, okay, I can't watch this anymore. But if it's a formal debate, he could say anything he wants. That's why I like you, because at least you let people talk. You say things that people may think is harsh, but it's like, so what? I have no problem with you saying harsh things. I have a problem with the communication. I think the way he communicates isn't very beneficial for either party, but I guess it depends. Like, for example, Shabir Ali said he wouldn't debate him because of this, and it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say a couple things. As far as Dr. Brown, when we say Dr. Brown's a Jew, we mean ethnically he's a Jew. But no, Dr. Brown would say in a heartbeat that he's a Christian. But basically, Christians who are Jewish, we normally call them Messianic Jews. So Jews who believe that Jesus is the Messiah. As far as Sam, in Sam's defense, he's just from a kind of different culture, right? So Sam is Assyrian, not Syrian. He's Assyrian.
Assyrian,
and
right.
yeah, and if you hang out with his family, you start to get it. They're just they tend to be very aggressive by nature. Him and his brothers and cousins and so on. It looks like you're around a bunch of professional rustlers. They're just these big tough dudes. In fact, Sam kind of looks like the baby of when he's around some of the other guys. But I'll just say, one, Sam is loyal to the death. In other words, he will defend you to the death. One of the most generous people on the planet. We'd be driving down the road. He would see homeless people. He'd say, "Stop the car." Say, "Stop the car," just so he can go out and give them some money and so on. When he's in an argument, it's going to adapt. I've seen Sam be very, very gentle. I've seen Sam be very, very gentle. I've seen him be very aggressive, and it's kind of a cultural thing, right? Like, let me give you an example. Christians in America think I'm way too much of a jerk. A lot of them say, this guy can't even be a Christian. He's so harsh when he's talking about this stuff, right? Christians in Pakistan, a lot of Christians in Pakistan say I'm too, and in India say I'm too soft. David, you're too weak. Like right now, they will be flipping out. How are you not yelling at this man? This is blasphemies. How are you not destroying him, right? And then you get to like Christians in the Middle East, and they kind of think I'm just right. But yeah, if you've ever seen like I've been there when you've got a Pakistani Christian and a Pakistani Muslim, but they're both in the U.S., so that the Pakistani Christian is protected by the laws, as opposed to being actually in Pakistan, which would be a different situation. But they'll immediately just jump right up in each other's faces and be yelling, and they'll kind of like try raising up, like up on their toes to like be looking down at the other person and stuff and yelling. And we look at that and we go, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. Whereas it's kind of a different culture, right? Whereas they look at us they look at us and, how are you guys not screaming at each other right now? You're so weak. You're so weak. And Nabil actually explained this to me, that when he sees someone, if I see someone yelling in what's supposed to be a calm discussion or something like that, I see someone start yelling or screaming, I'm thinking you're yelling and screaming because you're losing and you're getting desperate. Exactly. You're getting desperate. Whereas Nabil looked at it and you're yelling because you're passionate, because you have the truth and this other fellow is blaspheming and it's coming out as a kind of righteous anger. And if you're calm like you are right now, if you're calm, it's because deep down you don't believe what you're saying, and you don't believe what you're saying. And so, yeah, I've known enough Muslims and enough Christians from different parts of the world to understand. Yep, different cultures. So if I'm with Sam, I understand. He's got a different way of doing things, a different mentality, but there are people who love that, and there are people who hate it, just as there are people who are freaking out right now that we're, not being more aggressive. Those are my thoughts on that. But yeah, as far as Sam's information, because there are two things, right? There's one, the information that you're presenting, and two, there's how you're presenting it. And when I'm looking at something, I want to, okay, is the information correct? Right. So in other words, if I came up to you and I said, hey, 2 + 2 = 4. Well, that statement's, true or false. If I say, hey, 2 + 2 is 4, and I punch you in your face, well, that doesn't make it less true or less correct or something like that. And so, whether someone's being a jerk or being the nicest person in the world, it can affect whether you want to have a discussion with this particular person, whether you're going to want to listen to this person. But information-wise, Sam is a total wealth of information, because he has some weird mental abilities.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree. I take the viewpoint you take. Like, it's more of if for me, I personally, I'm not going to get offended by it. Like, I'm not someone who, and you would even think it's hypocritical me saying I wouldn't watch him because of that. Because I'm always preaching, saying, like, if it doesn't matter who's telling you or how they tell you, like, the biggest idiot and the meanest guy in the world could come and tell you the sky's blue. Mm-hmm. The sky is still blue, regardless of how you feel of their delivery. But I just meant in a general sense of when you're speaking of someone, and I understand the passion thing, there are a lot of passionate people. But I guess you could argue passion. But to me, when you're clearly winning a debate, which I would agree with the information, I feel there's no need to use this steamroll tactic as he uses. And I agree, maybe I don't know the culture, and that's not to say I'm not going to listen to it because of that. Mm-hmm. I just think in terms of justifying, for example, Shabir's position on why he wouldn't debate him. Shabir's a nice, calm dude. He looks like he would have no intention to hurt a fly. Like, that dude is so chill. I completely understand him in saying he would not engage in a debate with someone like that. Whereas, let's say you take someone like Mohammed Hijab, it would make perfect sense for him to engage because he is also this character that we see in his debates. So, yeah, definitely, me personally, I don't get blinded by the exterior show, but I just meant in terms of if you're the best way to explain to someone it can work for me. I guess that's in a way what worked for me is just destroying someone, because that's how I felt when I was talking to Muslims about Christianity when I was a Christian. So I guess that does work. Maybe it doesn't work instantly, but I do feel, I guess there is some claim, for example, Richard Dawkins using this mockery tactic. I guess that does work in some situations, but for some people it may be off-putting to where they can't hear your message from the get-go. But I personally don't see anything wrong with it, but it's just hard on the ears trying to listen to something like that.
Yeah, and on this particular issue, and Sam can testify. I'm always telling him, you got to dial it back some. You got to dial. There are situations where I'm like, yep, Sam, go after this dude. This dude is being a jerk. And there are other times where I'm like, Sam, this guy's not being a jerk at all. And you're going off. But what's cool is Sam will agree. It's just he gets in the moment and so on the issue of Shabir. And I say this with, I believe Shabir is the best there is. I do not believe that the reason Shabir is not debating Sam Shamoun is because of Sam Shamoun's attitude. Not in other words, not on this issue. Because if you watch Sam's formal debates, he kind of adjusts to the rhetoric of the other person. In other words, if the other person is being polite and so on, Sam will be polite in the formal debates. I believe that Sam Shamoun would destroy Shabir Ali. That's my Shabir is welcome to prove me wrong. Shabir is welcome to come on to this program where I will be monitoring to make sure no one acts like a jerk. Shabir is one of the nicest guys around. When I've debated him in the past, he always shows up with like bags of candy for my kids and stuff like that. And so very, very nice guy. But there are a lot of people who are scared of Sam for good reason. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the future. All right. Well, so we've gone through some of the issues, and yeah. So I would encourage you to check out those videos. And again, I have more. And yeah, I'd be interested in your feedback. You can leave comments there if you ever want to come back and talk about them there. So let's go ahead and get back to this issue, because here's what's cool. We've got people like Ali Dawa. Free speech is BS. The free speech is BS and so on. And yet we're just wondering if this is my laptop is freezing here. Check. I'm not sure. No, it's not working. Let's go ahead and see. I mean, you can't reset it because it's working. Let me try and hook this to my phone here. Okay, they're saying they're back. I can't see myself here. All right. Nope, that was.
Oh yeah, I think we're on now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that was totally me. Internet totally shut down on everything. I'm on my phone right now. So, all right. So, okay. All right. So where were we? We were talking about
freedom of speech.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, and guys, I do not know how long this is going to go, because it went out, and it's funny because I was telling you earlier, it just happens. Sometimes internet just fluctuates, but was mentioning that, yeah, we're here having a discussion and discussing some pretty sensitive issues. I mean, we're talking about Muhammad sucking on tongues, right?
Yep.
Now, we're able to do that because we kind of have an agreement. We kind of have an agreement that, hey, no one's going to kill each other over it. And, we have freedom of speech and so on, and that makes it okay. And you have these other guys who are, no, you just have to keep quiet about these kinds of things. And, yeah.
This is what I call conducting ourselves in a civil manner by engaging in free speech. To me, if they want to limit speech, I don't understand how they expect anyone to come to Islam in the first place, because if you can't speak on anything, that's what I said. They keep preaching consistency. If it's consistency, that means you can't offend anyone. Let's take a room, let's say, of 1,000 people, and you speak about religion. 1,000 people picked at random. There is like a 1% chance that you get out of that room without offending someone. It is such a low chance. Now, let's take even 10 people. You're most likely still going to offend one person when you're talking about a subject as sensitive as religion. So, of course, when you're speaking worldwide, there are going to be people who are offended. That doesn't mean the government can now impose a law changing these things. It's like if we had no speech in the first place, or at least limited speech due to being offended, I would have never even heard about Islam. Because the moment, and if there was still speech and I was someone who got offended, the moment I heard Dr. Zakir Naik say, you guys don't even like Jesus, you don't even follow Jesus, we follow more than you, we love more than you. If I was someone who just gets offended like that, I would have just clicked off instantly. So how do you expect people to come to the religion anyways without free speech? It's like, this is exactly what you do to get people to the religion. I don't know what they're trying to portray, like a false image, because anyone could see. Unfortunately for you guys, your videos are documented on YouTube. Look at Speaker's Corner and just type in Ali Dawa at Speaker's Corner. You can find so many videos of them getting into heated debates where they are throwing insults. So it's like, exactly where is the consistency in this? If you take this viewpoint that you cannot speak without offending someone, you are then taking the view that you...
Uh-oh.
Okay, cut out. Yeah, we back.
Yeah, it's funny. We're having a... Is there something like this happens when there's some huge thing on, like... Did something premiere on Netflix tonight? Does anyone know? Because this is when it's when everyone jumps on their internet. That's when you start having tech problems, and we're having them on both ends, even though we live on opposite ends of the country. So,
yeah, it's a coincidence.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add something here. I always think of it. It always seems a bit cowardly to me. Like, I automatically am suspicious of positions where someone says, oh, and by the way, you're not allowed to criticize my position here. And if you do, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to have you locked up, or something like that. Always suspicious of positions where you're not allowed to criticize.
Yes. This whole thing is... To me, I see the same thing. I see it. Okay. Besides the blind Muslims, because there are some, the people who are just going to take whatever you say as completely justified. Besides those people, even to the Muslims, I feel like doing this is almost making us feel like, well, is this being afraid to get your views exposed? That's why you can't do it. Like, oh, don't talk about us. We can talk all we want about you, but don't talk about us. Lest who knows what happens? Maybe we will get exposed. It's like, this is what this sends to people. And this is also a problem I have specifically with Muhammad Hijab, thinking he is above people in terms of, like, for example, you invite people on who are nobodies like myself. I'm not an apologist. I mean, I know not, you have read the Quran more times than I have in my entire life, probably in a month. Me in comparison to you is nothing, yet you still engage in dialogue. Let alone with scholars. You welcome debates, you welcome all these things. Like, I don't know I don't know the dude's channel name, but he proposed a debate between you and Muhammad Hijab to talk about the desecrating of the Quran. And he responded with no, but what can happen is we can have that dude Hamza Zorcius versus William Lane Craig. We can do that. Well, it's like, what message does that send to others where you're saying, these people who are bringing up good points, no, I'm not going to engage in dialogue with him. So there's that of being exposed, and then there's another thing which he may not understand, but I understand, being as I was in a search. But there's something called someone who is lost. When you do not know and you're hearing these views, the first thing they're going to do is go to YouTube and type in rebuttal, Islamic response. Now, what happens when you take someone like Sam or you or someone, because there are videos I've heard in response to Islam that I've not yet gotten views for. I don't have the references off the top of my head, but I know there have been some. What do you do when you go to YouTube and you're a lost person trying to find which religion is real? You know you can die any day. Life is precious. And if you do, you're going to die without a religion, being agnostic or whatever you are. And then when they go to see, okay, I want to see what his response is to Sam or someone like this, and all you see is videos directly saying, I won't respond to him. He's too beneath me. I'm his intellectual superior. you may know the arguments, or you may pass these off as foolish arguments, which is one thing I like about you, David, is you address basically everything and anything. You may pass these off as foolish arguments, but there's kids out there who don't know they're foolish. They've never heard these arguments. You may have heard them 1,000 times, but there are lots of people out there who don't know these things. So to them, it isn't some common sense. They don't know it's a foolish argument. To me, if it leads just one person astray, not closed-minded people who are just, they want to find every reason, people who are legitimately searching, if it leads just one person astray, it is worth making a rebuttal to. And I don't like this thing that this superiority complex he holds of they're beneath me, therefore I won't engage in debate with him. It's like, oh, you need a degree in Islam to know whether or not that's true. Okay, so then come out and condemn every single Muslim who doesn't have a degree in Islam and say to them, they do not know. They may be right by chance, but they do not have good reason to be right. It's just by chance, because not everyone has a degree in Islam, nor do you need one to speak about that.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree completely. And yeah, on the issue of Muhammad Hijab, yeah, I thought that was a great response, because Hijab contacted him. He contacted Capturing Christianity and said, "Hey, why aren't you condemning David Wood?" And he said, "Well, hey, if you want to come on here we can have a discussion with David Wood." Now, I would actually be interested in sort of discussing this and getting to the bottom of it. There's actually not a tremendous amount for you and I to discuss here on this issue, because we seem to agree on most of it. Let the government continue protecting speech, and that's if you're confident that you have the correct position, that's in your best interest, because you want to keep the flow of information open. And if you believe other positions are false, why in the world would you be so scared of them that you want to shut them down when you could use your speech to refute them? But I'm actually I would be interested in having a discussion with Muhammad Hijab about this. Like, wait a minute, you're saying that, insulting someone's sacred symbols is wrong. How do you explain these passages with Muhammad?
Exactly.
And so I'd just be interested in hearing him on that. And I know a lot of other people would be as well. And so, yeah, kind of the only other thing, really, as far as this discussion is, what is your view on the Islamic position? Because you do have instances in the Muslim source. You find both kinds of instances in the Muslim sources, and I think you could defend pretty much exactly what you're saying by pointing out, hey, when Muhammad was in the minority, he wasn't shutting other people down and things like that. And guess what? Muslims in the West are in the minority, and therefore, no, you're not here to impose Sharia on everyone else. You're not even in that position. But you do have things like when Muhammad conquered Mecca, he ordered his followers to kill certain people, and some of those were people who basically made fun of him. There were some young women who had were singing offensive songs about him and things like that, and there were people who were ordered to be killed. So I know your view on freedom of speech is pretty much the same as mine, but how do you think it reconciles with Islam? And so how are you coming to different conclusions, radically different conclusion from someone like Ali Dawah?
Right. Well, at first, I thought, obviously, I'm not a scholar on the Quran. I couldn't possibly be after only finding out about its existence only like a year and a half to 2 years ago. So obviously, I'm not a scholar on it. But my impression was that we do believe in these things of smashing idols. And in the Hadith, Muhammad would smash idols and all these things. And if shirk is such a bad thing, it's like, I don't see what's wrong with smashing something that is taking you away. If shirk is an unforgivable sin, I don't see what's wrong with smashing these idols to get away from that. The same way I saw a video recently of in like Saudi or something of these Muslim women in burqas grabbing this Hindu like elephant that was in a store and shattering them all on the floor, throwing them down and shattering them. It was somewhere where everyone in the video was dressed in burqas. So I don't know how those statues got there, but they were all shattering them. Well, these lands, wherever that was, that had to have been a place where there is a Muslim majority of some sort, because every single person in the background of the video had these burqas on. But as far as is my view an Islamic position, how do I reconcile that with, well, I personally thought it was prior to all the DMs I got saying, you're wrong, you're misunderstanding. Muhammad could do that. We don't have authority to do that. He was in a certain situation in which that was granted. And my thing is this, well, let's say I do have a contrary viewpoint. Why is it wrong for me to have a contrary viewpoint, but then Muhammad Hijab?
Lost Dustin for a second, but he's been coming back so far. Unless that's on my end, which is possible, given how things have been going here.
With some evidence, I guess you could say, then it's completely against Islam.
We lost you for a second, so go back about 30, 40 seconds.
Okay, so I was saying I don't understand why, because I thought it was an Islamic viewpoint, being as Muhammad did
by the way, that is interesting that you had assumed that this was the Islamic viewpoint, and then you've got a bunch of people coming and saying no, that's actually not. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly, yeah. So I got all these things saying I misrepresented the hadith, and I don't know the references, so I was like, all right, I'll look it up and read it. I read it and I was like, I don't see what the difference is. Why would a God say this? Again goes to the exposing thing. I don't know the Quran I don't know every single verse. Let's just say there is verses saying, I know Fareed Responds posted one that says you cannot condemn other people or else they might condemn God, our God, basically.
Yeah.
But if there are a constant instance of verses saying, make sure they don't do anything that'll make them talk about what we're doing, that is in a way worrying. It's that same concept of, well, what if it is a false religion? And the reason it has so many of these verses is so it doesn't get exposed. It's saying, Muslims, just play it safe. That way they don't come and start trying to probe at us. But if it's a contrary viewpoint, as I said, I don't know if it got cut out, but I don't get why Muhammad Hijab can hold this contrary viewpoint about the apostasy laws in Islam, but then when I hold a contrary viewpoint, which I can feel was much of a stretch, his was more of a stretch than my view was, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be corrected. How do you hold this view on apostasy laws that is contrary to what the scripture is saying, but then when I hold a view that you can justify in some way that it was done by our prophet himself, and then everyone comes out and says I'm misrepresenting it? But I guess some people were consistent in condemning Muhammad Hijab about the verses of apostasy. So I don't know exactly how I do reconcile it with the verses in Islam, because I'm not quite sure what to do with two separate instances of what we should do.
I'm going to go ahead and help you out here. I'm going to go ahead and help you out because I've thought about this before. How would I, if I were a Muslim and I wanted to defend some position, how would I do that? I think about that sometimes. And here's how I would do it, and here's how I think you could get to a position that's closer to yours and not to Muhammad Hijab's. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you do have people killing each other in the time of Muhammad for making certain claims or for mocking him and so on. But notice, that's once Islam has taken over. And last time I checked, Islam has not taken over. So we are not under the authority of Islam. And so here's how I would defend it if I were a Muslim. In fact, I could take it a step further. Basically, when Muhammad was the persecuted prophet in Mecca, it was he preached a message of religious tolerance, right? So I mean, there were times when he would mock or criticize and things like that, but hey guys, don't get physical over this sort of thing. So there was that. And then again, later on, then it changed to defensive jihad, and then still later it became offensive jihad. When it's at the stage of offensive jihad, yeah, you can't have criticism of Muhammad. And even before that, when it was at the stage of defensive jihad, if people were, saying particularly mean things about Islam, there would be assassinations and things like that. And so I think that's what a lot of these guys are thinking about. Wait a minute, people like Abu Wafak and Asma bint Marwan and so on, they were stopped from criticizing Islam, and therefore, if you're a Muslim, you need to stop these people from speaking and so on. If I were to make this argument, in other words, if I were to defend a pro-free speech position and try to make it consistent with Islam, I think it would go something like this. When Muhammad was in Mecca and he's preaching a message of, hey, let God judge. We can have our disagreements here, but let's not kill each other. Hang on, lost.
All right. Sorry.
All right.
Can you restart? It cut out right before you said I'm about to make the position, and then you went on.
Okay.
Muhammad.
I'll cut back. I'll dial it back. So this is the argument I would use. So when Muhammad's the persecuted prophet, then the message is one of religious tolerance, promoting religious tolerance. We have disagreements. Yeah, we can argue. Yeah, we can, disagree. But let's not kill each other over this stuff. The underlying principle here seems to be that different things can be in the best interest of the Muslim community at different times, right? If you're totally outnumbered, then what's in... we keep losing Dustin. You back, Dustin? You back?
Hello?
Yeah. We'll wrap up here in the next couple minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, my position would I gotta keep repeating it. But basically what you find in these early stages of jihad is doing what's in the best interest of the Muslim community. If Muslims are outnumbered, then what's in the best interest of the Muslim community is, hey guys, we can have our disagreements, we can have our arguments, let's not get physical over this stuff. When Muhammad was able to dominate, then the position became, hey, I'm going to subjugate you and so on. So the underlying principle in all those situations was what's in the best interest of the Muslim community. And so taking that principle, I think you could say, well, what's in the best interest of the Muslim community now in the West? Well, it's not running around trying to shut people down or trying to impose Sharia or start running your mouth about, killing apostates and things like that. That's not what's in the best interest of your community. What's in the best interest of your community would be, hey, whatever disagreements we have, whatever arguments we have, let's not get physical over this. Let's not kill each other over this. Let's not get violent over this. And that would be pretty straightforward model of free speech. So I think you could defend it just by saying that's what's in the best interest of the Muslim community. Whereas I think your Ali Dawas and your Muhammad Hijabs, they're looking at what Muhammad and the Muslim community did later, but Muslims aren't in that position in the West. And so yeah, those are my views. But yeah, we don't want to keep continuing because we keep having, this is just not a great night for live stream as far as the technical problems have gotten worse and worse. I do not know why, because this is not normal, but I'm assuming there's something that everyone is watching on Netflix right now. But go ahead and share any final thoughts you have, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, yeah, I tend to agree that I guess it's depending on how you look at what should be implemented or the position of the West. They're speaking from being in the UK, so I mean maybe their laws are different as to what I know. I think the UK limits more things, or at least attempts to limit more things than the US does, or at least is more successful in doing so. But it's hard to reconcile with what goes with what, because if you do try and say in the way that, like you said, of it depends where we're at now, if you use that same viewpoint, which in a way is what Muhammad Hijab was getting at, of with the apostate laws of this is in the best interest of how society is now. But then you get people like Daniel Hakikachu who come out and say, no, that's not an Islamic viewpoint you can take. That's not what it says. So I don't know how to, I don't know. I think what would be best is that these Muslims do engage in debate with people like you, and they don't say someone is beneath them, or because as far as I see it, if someone's so easy to refute, go on and do it. You can maybe get a few more Muslims. I don't see the need to say, oh, well, I won't talk with David Wood, or like you said, he needed to be critiqued. You stated your arguments. He said he's willing to discuss it with you. Now you must go and defend your arguments. If it's such an easy thing to do, why don't you just do it? That's the main message I want to leave, is I beg these Muslims, please engage in debate with everyone. You may know the arguments. It may be stupid to you, but there's people who don't know the arguments. There's people where it isn't a stupid claim because they don't know. Engage in debate with everyone and anyone, especially when they are apologists.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm a little suspicious of the guys who say that this guy's beneath them. They're like, gosh, what are there, like 40 Muslim channels that crank out videos about me all day long? Come on, guys, come on, yeah. And it's funny because people are welcome. If Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa said they wanted to come on tomorrow, they could. I'd set it up. I'd be happy to have that discussion. Yeah, as far as you, Dustin, there are basically two scenarios. There are the debates. And a lot of time in the debates, the debaters are pretty well entrenched in their positions, right? So in other words, a lot of time you're not even thinking, hey, I'm going to convince this guy that I'm debating against by the end of this debate.
The audience, man.
Yeah, it's more to inform the audience. And other times it's not like now we're not having a debate, but if it's someone who's not a jerk and is willing to explain his positions and explain how he came to certain conclusions, because I'm interested in hearing from someone when someone says, hey, I changed my position, I became a Muslim or I became a Christian. Multiple times on here, I've had people like Armin Navabi and Abdullah Samir and so on, where they come on and they explain how they became atheists. I'm not an atheist. I'm not trying to defend atheism and so on, but I'm interested in hearing their story of how they came to this position. And so interested in that, especially when people are still open to learning and like you are saying, yeah, I'll look into that and so on. So that's all cool. Guys, the link to Dustin's channel is in the description box. Well, there's a link to a video he posted, so go check that out. If he's going to be thinking through these things and posting videos and so on, you can check those out on his channel and follow that. And yeah, Dustin, you ever want to come back and discuss something else? Welcome to it.
Yeah, I'll definitely hit you up if I come across something or a view change.
And if you ever wanted to have a discussion with someone like Sam Shamoon, I could yeah, but no, if you ever want to have a friendly discussion, there's some topic that you're interested in, you want to come back and have a discussion. Also, if you wanted to bring on a friend or an imam, or if there's a Muslim scholar that you'd like and you'd like to bring someone along, happy to have that as well.
Most definitely.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for watching in spite of all the technical difficulties. We'll catch everyone next time.